Last pod of the year, baby. Last pod of the year.
Sure is.
Sure is. And what a year it's been. Or has it? We'll find out. Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. We own our own goals edition. I am your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Yeah, this is our last episode of 2024. Our first full 12-month calendar year as a show.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's right.
And how much we've grown.
And how much we've grown. And how many mistakes we've made along the way.
It's so true. But on January 1st, 2024, we had never done a full season preview for the NWSL. We didn't have a Patreon yet. We had not partnered with American Soccer Analysis.
Correct.
We didn't have a Discord. This is a big year for us.
We didn't have a Blue Sky.
We did have a Blue Sky. We
didn't use it.
Barely. Yeah, this has been quite a cool year, I think, for us.
I agree. I went back and listened to all of our preseason previews and some other of our old backlog episodes, and while there are plenty of mistakes, there's plenty to be proud about. But also, I just think, my we've grown. I'd like to think that next season we'll make fewer mistakes, but I just know that's not possible. But before we get to the theme of this episode, which is the best own goals of 2024,
got two big deals to talk about.
The moratorium on news breaks does not exist, and therefore we have two big deals, both involving Gotham. Gotham does this to us at this time of year. They make news.
They tend to, for whatever. Like last year was because they were bringing players in. This year, it's a little bit of both. A lot of players are leaving, a lot of players are coming in. But in this case, one's going out, one's coming in. So as everybody knows, Yasmeen Ryan, she has been transferred to the Houston Dash for $400,000 in allocation money, which is a huge deal. One of the record all cash deal in league history, plus $80,000 in intra-league transfer funds on top of that. Yael Averbuch-West said that what was the exact quote? They moved heaven and earth to try and make this deal happen for Yasmeen Ryan.
Something like that, burning the candle at both ends, diligently apply, it was that language.
In other words, Yasmeen Ryan wanted to move, and they had to do a lot of work to make sure that they were getting an appropriate package back. It seems, if we're reading between, it seems like she wanted to specifically move to Houston, which is interesting. Delaney Sheehan obviously just signed there a few weeks ago. So this is a large chunk of money now that they are going to need to spend, and may have just spent some of it in signing Gabby Portillo.
This is a move that it feels like strategically, Gotham really went and got as much as possible in return.
Well, I mean, given her age, given the fact that she had 2 years plus a club option, and given the fact that she's, good, then they should not have accepted anything less than a price like this. Maybe they were able to drive the price up higher than it ultimately could have settled on, but Yasmeen Ryan should not be cheap. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of allocation money went back the other way when she moved to Gotham initially a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was significantly less than this, but yes,
sure.
There was. I think that this is a pretty surprising amount of money, but also Houston got a really good attacker. And in Delaney Sheehan and Yasmeen Ryan, they have taken two substantial pieces away from Gotham and two really productive players on a team that was sorely lacking that last season.
I mean, for nothing else, despite the fact that they don't have a head coach, their GM doesn't officially get installed until Wednesday, January 1st. They are splashing a lot of cash around.
That is right.
Which is, I think, great. Houston all of a sudden I mean, are they sniffing a playoff place for 2025? Maybe not. But now, I mean, they're certainly a much more interesting team now than they were a month ago, 2 months ago.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I learned from re-listening to all of our previews from last season. Maybe we should be a little more reserved in whether or not we think a team can make the playoffs or not. No, I still think Houston is not a playoff team, despite the addition of Delaney Sheehan and Yasmin Ryan. But they've added two really productive pieces to the team, and whatever coach they end up hiring will have really flexible, interesting attacking tools at his disposal now.
Well, I think also that the real like long-term victory for Houston here is that they got younger. Like both of these players are going into their age 26 seasons, and this is a team that often rolled out a central midfield comprised of pieces like Yuki Nagasato, Ellen Rubinson, and Sophie Schmidt, none of whom were under 35. Maybe Rubinson, I can't remember, but none were under 30, and
none who played like they were under 35. Yes,
that's right.
That's right.
So you suddenly think about a right wing comprised of Michelle Alozia and Yasmin Ryan in some combination, and Delaney Sheehan partnering as an 8 with, I mean, whoever they decide, whether it's Sarah Puntigam or Schmidt again. There's a lot more flexibility in this team. There's a lot more versatility of skill set. It's just money. They weren't spending to the cap. They spent maybe more on salary last year than people would think, given how bad they were. But they're not among the league's big spenders. So if all they're losing is money to upgrade their roster and get their roster younger, then it's a victory. Even if there is clearly like no set plan or direction in how this roster is getting shaped.
Yeah, the more interesting end of this deal for me is Gotham and the sort of swirling narrative that I think was stamped out a little bit by the next piece to fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Gotham's signing of Gabby Portillo from Corinthians.
Yeah.
That is a really great signing, in my humble estimation.
Yeah. There is the statistical profile of Gabby Portillo is like maybe a little bit of a mixed bag, just because the only data that we have for her that goes beyond major tournaments with Brazil is from Y-Scout, and Y-Scout is better than nothing, but it's maybe not as rigorous, or the quality of the data may not be quite as high as you might get from Opta-based XG metrics that you find on ASA or on FBref. And the data that we do have suggests that maybe she wasn't the biggest contributor, at least in terms of like creating her own shot. I think Y-Scout pegs her for about 0.11 XG per 96 or per 90 with Corinthians across the Brasileirão and the Libertadores. Not great, but she's a right winger, and she produced more than 0.2 XA per 90, which is great. And if you're looking for a 1v1 artist who knows how to provide service into the center of the box, then you could do worse than Gabby Portillo. And then most significantly is that she absolutely balled the fuck out at the Olympics with Brazil.
Yeah. At the highest level, she was an absolutely crucial figure for the Brazilian women's national team.
A team that won a silver medal.
Yeah, a team that won a silver medal.
0.52 non-penalty XG per 96 at the Olympics across 504 minutes.
Yeah, and in the process beat a number of really good teams. They beat Spain.
She finished, if you set the minutes threshold to 200 minutes, she comes in third in the entire tournament in net G plus per 96 for the Olympics. Like she was outstanding for Brazil. Arguably Brazil's best player throughout those 6 games.
And I think a lot of the ways in which Brazil played at the Olympics looks stylistically similar to what Gotham often tries to roll out in terms of the way in which they pressured. Like, but if you look at how they pressured Spain, Gotham loves a high press as well.
Yeah.
In fact, there's sort of something paradoxical about Gabby Portillo as like an almost too perfect Gotham player who will win the ball high up the box, but is bad at creating her shot.
It's a good shout.
I think that there is something to that. That said, you know, if you're going to go and lose a Yasmin Ryan, go and have Gabby Portillo waiting in the wings to announce.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that sort of makes this deal really interesting to me is Gabby Portillo is almost exactly the same age as Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet. She's a little bit like, she sort of fits in the core of that team's win now window.
She's going into her age 29 season for next year.
Yeah.
And turns 30 in mid-July. Yes, which is exactly in that Lavelle Sonnet. Well, Sonnet's a couple years older, but definitely in that Lavelle territory.
If you're going to go and try to win right now, I don't have any apprehension about signing Gabby Portillo to like a 2, 3, 4 year deal.
It's a 2-year deal plus a mutual option.
Yeah, so it's likely a 3-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that strikes me as the ideal piece to sort of bring in at this point.
Yeah, what we don't know is just how much of that $400K in allocation money that came from Houston went to paying the transfer fee, or if it's going to some salary buy down so they don't get cap hit, or if they're using other sources of funds to pay for the transfer to bring Portillo over. We don't have any information on that, so we still don't really have a sense of like how much each of these deals ultimately affects Gotham's bottom line for 2025.
For sure.
But at the very least, you go out and you get Portillo and you're getting $400K back from another deal. To basically swap one player for another at the same position is pretty good business, especially if one of those players didn't want to be at Gotham anymore. The thing that I'm really interested in is, what does this mean for Midge Purce? Because Portillo is a right winger. Midge Purce, Gotham reported that Midge Purce is in active negotiations with the club to re-sign, but we don't know what that means. She's still a free agent. She's still free to negotiate with other clubs. Given the fact that they just replaced Midge Purce with a player who plays her position, is exactly her age, and at least based on like the small sample of the Olympics, might not be a drop-off in terms of talent quality. Does this potentially mean that Purce is moving on from Gotham? It's tough to say.
If Midge Purce's goal was to re-sign with Gotham, this hurt her from a negotiating standpoint.
I don't know if that was her goal.
If it wasn't her goal, this is the writing on the wall that says time to move on.
Yeah, it's difficult to see how you get Gabby Portillo and Midge Purce into the same team.
Yeah, Midge Purce, who is coming back from a very serious knee injury, and is a player who has dealt with injuries throughout her career, is entering the phase of her career where you sort of start wondering, are we looking at diminishing returns against your injury history? So she's not a slam dunk for me for Gotham to re-sign to begin with. And now that you've filled that role, I think you're looking, if you're Gotham, you're looking at Midge Purce only as someone to bring back as a depth piece for a team-friendly deal, which does not probably align with how Midge Purce either sees herself or how many teams will see Midge Purce.
No, and if you recall, when we all watched the off-season, when she was considering asking for a trade rather than signing a 1-year extension, a lot of what she talked about was feeling like she wasn't being valued properly with the club. So
this isn't going to help that.
This isn't going to help that. And then to your point, like 2 straight years of injuries that resulted in fewer than 900 total minutes across 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And when you're on the cusp of 30, she turns 30 in, I believe, September of next year, then maybe Gotham's value of her and Midge Purce's value of herself don't align, and it is time to move on. But we don't know the answer to any of these questions. All we know is that the club were in active negotiations with her as of 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and active negotiations with her does not mean she is not also in active negotiations with other clubs.
Exactly right. Let's just pause and talk about Gotham. So the pieces that they've brought in are Gabby Portillo, Jalen Howell, college player Sarah Shapansky, and an international signing, Stella Niamekye, I believe is how you pronounce it. They re-signed Mandy Freeman, and the players out the door, significant players out the doors: Delaney Sheehan, Maitane Lopez-Milian, Sam Hyatt, Lynn Williams, Cassie Miller, Yasmin Ryan. This is maybe a team that is not going to put out a starting 11 of any less caliber and quality than the last couple of years, but this does feel like a less deep team than it did in 2024. What's your read on the status of their squad at the moment?
It's an incomplete for me right now. I still imagine that they will sign more. That said, for me, their 11 in total probably hasn't gotten a ton worse. The loss of Lynn Williams, the potential loss of Midge Purse, the loss of Delaney Sheehan, the loss of Maitane. These are either people who weren't giving you full seasons of minutes or weren't being asked to play full seasons of minutes. Mm-hmm. And Gotham is a team that finished third in the league and went out on penalties right away for, close to the final and are a season off of winning the final. So I think the floor is already pretty damn high.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the concerns and the sort of the foul stench of rumors coming out of Northern New Jersey. First off, nothing new for Northern New Jersey. Like, I wouldn't be overly concerned about just yet. I think I'm more concerned about where they are on the age curve, but maybe not for next season.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't exactly the coach turning into a pumpkin in Cinderella, but I think the odds that happens next year are now higher by some margin than they were last year, especially with getting older in the form of Gabby Portillo over Yaz Ryan.
Right.
It's got to be win now in Gotham. And I suspect if that's where their mindset is, that they are not done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag. Like, they've got young pieces. Ella Stevens, obviously. Jenna Neiswanger, obviously. Jalen Howell now. Sarah Shapansky, if she can hit the ground running, which is no guarantee as a rookie coming out of college. So there is youth here. And Neely Martin's young. And Tierna Davidson's young, too. But as you say, like, Rose Lavelle is on the cusp of 30. Esther, well into her 30s at this point. Crystal Dunn, again, big question mark, but not getting any younger. Emily Sonnet goes without saying. So, yeah, they need to hit quick and try and get a second title fast.
Yeah. It is very win now for Gotham, and I think that they have the pieces to do that, or at least to challenge for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see, but Gabby Portillo, I think, is a great signing, especially if you're going to lose a Yaz Ryan.
If you've got any question marks, it's that the club data that we have in a league that's
isn't great.
That's much less competitive. We're going to talk about Maria Sanchez a little bit. It's sort of that Maria Sanchez profile where she's not going to create her own shot, but she's very good at providing for others. Is that a diverse enough skill set to survive in a league like the NWSL? The counterpoint to that, of course, is Bia Zanerato did just fine when she was healthy, when she made the transition. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny. As we move into the own goals thing, I realized as I was going through this last night that there is a real... we probably need to do a more sort of holistic reckoning of like what where outside talent comes from and how they tend to perform in total. We saw a lot of European signings last year that were like meh to meh minus. Some that like blew the socks off, but I feel like Brazilians have adapted, generally speaking, and Haley Carter alluded to this in our conversation with her, have adapted, generally speaking, really well to this league.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Bia is another example of that. So
yeah, it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. And I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely fair.
She comes with caveats, for sure.
Yeah, but as you say, there's plenty to be optimistic about, too.
Let's move on and talk best own goals.
Yes.
Oh, I'll be intermixing some audio for the spiciest of all of these. But boy, this is our day of atonement. And here we go. Evan, I would be remiss not to start off our best own goals of 2024 without citing the fact that you and I both picked Orlando to miss the playoffs.
Indeed.
Yeah, I have Orlando in 9th, and I made that prediction before the Banda signing. But the more I look at this team, Look, I might be wrong. There are question marks. The one team that I'm sort of higher on, Louisville, it has the same number of question marks. It should be caveated that we picked them to miss the playoffs. We had locked in our rankings of these teams before the announcement of Barbara Banda. But as I went back and listened to our preview of Orlando, neither of us thought Banda moved the needle enough to get them even to a home field, to a home game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I mean,
own goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's an own goal in the fact that they indeed won the Shield and won the title, and Barbara Banda had the second best season in NWSL history, most likely. All of that is a fact. But I think when you're talking about predictions, like, they were very good in 2023 and probably deserved a playoff spot, missed it only by goal difference. But going into 2024, I don't think, based on the information that the public could get, they could have access to, I don't think it was a sure thing that they were going to have the season that they had in 2024.
No, I think our failure was more of imagination than it was of like looking at data.
Well, maybe, but also like what value is that in predictions?
No, totally. But also I think we should own that we hadn't noticed with great enough intention. We hadn't like really identified the things that I think Seb Hines was doing tactically to sort of evolve this team appropriately.
I don't think I'm not owning that. I think that
I will.
Okay, fine, but I don't think you should own it either. Like, I think that just because he had a lot of coaches have good tactical plans that didn't win the title last year. Like there is a certain amount of information that we have access to as people in the public, with the amount of soccer that we've watched and the way that we watch games, to tell us various things that don't actually have a very high level of predictive value. And I charge anyone else either listening to this podcast or who does this kind of work, who are not team side, to tell me that they did a better job in making predictions like this. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about the fact that we got 5 out of 8 playoff teams. I feel good about the fact that the Orlando miss is caveated with like Barbara Banda got signed right as we were recording and releasing these things.
And also, I think I even said like this is just an incredibly high variance team. Like,
and it was
like maybe I didn't say this on the episode, but certainly in the preview that I wrote, I was like, this team could waltz into the playoffs and get a home game, or they could miss the playoffs altogether. Based on what we have in late February, early March 2024 to go on, all of those options are in play.
They definitely went out and executed a 90th percentile season.
Yeah.
And are well positioned with the signing of Grace Chanda to like not really skip a beat next year either.
If there are people out there who predicted a Shield and a title for Orlando, and that wasn't just like blind dumb luck, like if you could do this again and predict another team's success or failure, please give us a call and we will end this podcast tomorrow. You know, or if you're not working for a team, you should get a team to hire you because you're a genius.
Yeah, I'll double down on that and say if you're not an Orlando Pride fan and you made that selection.
Yeah.
Even more impressive. If you're a Pride fan, the purple tinted glasses were working well.
I think what we should own, or at least, you know, what this can help color this ownage, is that we are, especially for teams like Orlando who are very invested in scouting and analytics, like we're behind on teams in terms of what you can.
For sure.
What you can comfortably predict about a player's or a team's skill level and success level. Because I think it is fair to say that Seb Hines and Haley Carter and the people who work for them knew more than we did. You know?
To say the least, yes. And executed on their vision of what this team could be with the long-range planning that had been done. If you haven't listened to it, highly recommend you go back and listen to our interview with Haley Carter. maybe my favorite episode that we've ever done. But if you want to hear about a team that sort of has an organizational roadmap set out and a plan of action, stuff that I think was less clear to us going into last season, listen to that episode and understand that there are only a handful of teams that are doing what Orlando is doing. And you would be wise to bet in their favor and not against them.
Yeah, and I think that it's also important to underline that every team talks big about their plans, about their organizational setups, and talk big about their, their mentality, their chemistry, the locker room stuff, the intangibles. Everybody has a narrative about how good they are at those things, and not all of those teams win titles. And a lot of times people use confirmation bias to say that, oh, well, they won, therefore it was because of X, Y, or Z. And I don't want to say that Carter is wrong in her assessment of her own organization, but it is one data point, and it was relayed to us 48 hours before they won a title, and a week and several weeks after they had won a Shield.
And she doesn't suggest that like even winning that title game is validation of their project. The project is proving itself valuable on its own.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that makes me sit up and pay attention and want to listen to what Carter has to say and give validity to the project that she and Hines have put in place, is that she said the wins and losses don't matter. It's the as you say, it's the process, it's the project, it's how we build every single day. That is the thing that tells me that maybe there's less confirmation bias going on, and maybe there's something stickier in how they have put that team together and how they run that team.
And I think for myself, and why we'll sort of put a bow on this, why I think I'll own the own goal on this, is that I actually think that should I have been watching slightly closer, there was evidence to suggest that they were doing things that, especially toward the end of last season, or the season 2023, they were sort of putting the pieces together and figuring out how to build this incredibly dynamic roster with a lot of depth and a lot of coverage and a system that was dynamic enough to be defensively solid and was in dire need of a Barbara Banda type, and then they went and got a Barbara Banda type.
And if you recall, in one of those episodes toward the end of the season, when we were like, who's going to be the sixth place playoff team, I was like, I think it might be Orlando, and you laughed at me.
Well, I did laugh at you because we had just seen them cede 2.1 or 2.2 XG to Angel City.
Yeah.
So there was that. But I probably did laugh at you, and that was wrong, and I'm sorry. All right, moving on. Evan, you want to own something?
Yeah, I think I said at one point toward the end of Amy Rodriguez's tenure at Utah that there was no way that they were ever going to win another game, and that was wrong. I don't know. This feels like 15 points is their ceiling to me.
When we came back from the Olympics, you saw them having like maybe 3 points available to them for the rest of the season. You didn't think they'd win another game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I didn't know what Jimmy Kuhnratz was going to be like as a coach. Nobody did. Yeah. And incidentally, second youngest coach ever in NWSL history, and the youngest coach since Mark Parsons took over the Washington Spirit back in 2013. Anyway, I think the bigger part of the thing that I have to own is like I was not convinced that Claudia Zarnoza and Chloe Lacasse were going to have that 10-game run that they ended up having.
Sure.
And they both were excellent across those 10 games.
Yeah, and improved many of the other components of Utah. And I think we slept a little bit on Mandy Hott, maybe just a little bit.
I don't know. I mean, I was pretty high on Mandy Hott before that. I think we even said at one point, it's like Kate Del Fava and Mandy Hott are the only things that are keeping this team afloat.
Yeah. Preseason, we had slept a little bit on Mandy Hott.
Yeah, fair enough.
Early in the season, we were on that, and I feel good about that. My own goal tethered to this is that I thought Amy Rodriguez would get an entire season and had a really long lead. She proved me wrong. But the futility of those.
But the reason you had that feeling is because it certainly seemed from the outside that she was the one pulling more strings than Kelly Cousins was. And that felt to us like she had the ear of David Blitzer and Ryan Smith more than Cousins did. So when it was Rodriguez that got fired and Cousins who seemed to get more power to run the roster the way she wanted, that was a genuine surprise.
Yeah, I didn't expect that power dynamic to shake out in that way. Yeah. But Amy Rodriguez, I think, was, and you can hear it in the Kelly Cousins interview that Theo Lloyd Hughes did. I think Amy Rodriguez was blustering in the media and setting expectations in a really unhealthy place. And I think Kelly Cousins set expectations in a reasonable place. And when you don't perform up to expectations and you have two voices shouting at you about what's going on in the club, the voice that says, hey, this is incremental and this is going to take time and we really aren't that good, is the one that ownership ultimately, to their credit, went with.
Yeah.
And decided to give power to.
And also it didn't help Rodriguez to have lost so many games. Like, she just did not have a leg to stand on beyond basically a couple of wins that they didn't deserve to win if you peeled the layers back. So
yeah, it was the way they lost games and the way that frankly, it was the way they won games too, unconvincingly.
Mm-hmm.
That I think led to the no confidence firing sooner than I thought was going to happen.
And again, like props to the signings that she brought in. I mean, internationals in that summer window over the age of 30 was probably all that was going to be available to a team like Utah, because they're not generally an attractive destination for international transfers. But Lacasse, who had turned 31 by the time she joined up, and Zornosa, who was 33.
Jeez.
They end up producing, if you set the minutes threshold to 500 minutes, like among all attackers, Chloe Lacasse comes in 10th on the season in net G plus above positional average per 96 minutes. She's tied for 10th. It's 10 games. So, you got to caveat it with that. But still, like, that is just a superlative performance. And then if you just look at like the defense and the passing components of G plus, like, and again, set that minutes threshold low enough to 500 minutes, like Claudia Zornosa was the best central mid in the whole league. And it wasn't close. Again, 10 games, small sample, but like, that's incredible for a 33-year-old who had never played in the NWSL before to play that way across 10 games in a team that seemed dead in the water is just very impressive. Can they do it again in 2025? Who's to say? But they were the right moves for right now. And Cousins needed to at least stabilize that team just to get them to November. And they ended up finishing in 11th when everybody thought they'd finish 14th. Like, we got to own that.
Yeah, before we exit Utah, maybe you want to own just one more thing.
First overall pick rarely becomes the rookie of the year, but I kind of feel pretty good about Allie Sentner, particularly because she'll be the one
she gonna play. She gonna play.
That fucking team. She gonna play.
She's gonna get her minutes.
To my credit, I abandoned that very quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah, it was just it was a shocking, funny thing to discover when going back and listening to our archive that at one point Evan had projected good things for Allie Sentner. Allie Sentner, who became one of your bugaboos or throughout the season. I just thought it was so funny.
And I really don't have any caveats or defenses or pleadings to offer with my pick for that, because I'm pretty sure I was just like, well, she's the number one overall pick and I don't have any better other options. So
to move on to the number 2 pick, we were both wrong about Savvy King.
Yeah.
I think that's flipping fucking brilliant to put Savvy King at left back.
I think we thought the positional flexibility that she might have and the pedigree of being the number 2 pick would be enough to sort of bring her along at Bay. And while we had both sort of overestimated Bay, I don't actually feel as bad about that. Bay ended up having a spectacular season for an expansion team. Savvy King was not a part of what worked there.
No. And it is a shame. I mean, I think there is still a lot of like raw tools upside with Savvy King, but whether she went pro too early or if she wasn't being put in the best position to succeed, or if maybe those raw tools don't have as much upside as they might seem whatever it is, she did not produce on any level as a left back for Bay FC, and seems at this stage in the game like a real draft bust.
Out of qualifying fullbacks in terms of G plus, like by your sort of fullback rating.
Yeah, which isolates like passing, defense, and dribbling.
Yeah, she was 38th out of 45.
Mm-hmm.
That is not good.
No.
And the players that are around her are ones that either got pulled sooner or we highlighted as also big problems for their systems.
Yeah, like Nicole Payne or Madison Pogarch.
Yeah, Nicole Payne, who we were harsh about in Portland, and Sabby King were basically the same value of bad.
Yeah. So what does this mean for Savvy King's future in the NWSL? Who knows? She's still, despite all of these issues, is still very young. I think she's going to be, 19 next year? Or 20. She's going to be 20, I think.
20.
A lot of room to grow. A lot of room for improvement. She might become a center back rather than be a fullback. A lot's still on the table for her. So, we will keep an eye on it. But, yeah, just didn't work. Didn't justify the number 2 overall pick based on the 2024 that she had.
You want to go and move up the pitch, Bay?
Yeah, I mean, I think Asisat Oshuala actually had a pretty decent season with Bay FC, but the season I thought she was going to have when that transfer got announced is not the season that she had. So I do have to take an own goal on that one.
What do you think the goal total is? If you were setting a betting line, plus minus on what you'd expect.
I think you could set that at 12, and I'd take the over on it.
You just got a little high, and who can fault enthusiasm? But yeah, Asisat Oshuala, who came in from Barcelona with some limited minutes, but just an outrageous output.
I think the reason that I wasn't bothered so much by the limited minutes was that she had performed at those kinds of levels when she was a regular starter and was doing it against good teams as well as minnows. But the NWSL is not Liga FA, and it's not the UEFA Women's Champions League, and Oshuala turned 30 last year. And, 0.35 non-penalty XG per 96 by ASA's model, that's solid. It's very solid. A lot of those shots didn't find net, and her overall value by net G plus was negative. So the things that really drove Bay's attacking success were players like Rachel Kundananji and Tess Bodie and, Penelope Hawking when she got transferred. So Oshuala was not in the middle of a lot of that. But, her receiving score was excellent, which when you're a number 9, that should be your carrying tool. Being able to get yourself into good positions to receive the ball and shoot. It's just that her decision-making in the ultimate spots from which she did shoot weren't all that great.
It's another one of those, and there were European players who came over and really struggled in this league, or players who had played in Europe, not necessarily European, who struggled to translate. And I think Oshuala is by no means the biggest own goal in that regard.
Not even on her own team.
Not even on her own team. But the fall was probably greater. I was the bigger skeptic about this, and she still underperformed my expectation for that.
Yeah.
And I think it is just really hard to assess how to take a player out of a system like Barcelona and a league like Liga FA and really understand what they're going to deliver. That's where scouting sort of needs to close the gap. But she's still a good piece. Even if she is net G plus, mild negative, there's a lot of raw athleticism and talent that if the team figures out how to harness, I think has upside for next season.
Yeah, and also if you're that good at making off-ball runs to get yourself into good spots to actually receive the ball, that's a much... if you're a head coach and a GM, you're happy that skill is already in place and you don't have to coach that up. The other stuff you can figure out, especially with the fresh start of Matt Potter now being the sporting director and, a second season under your belt where you're no longer an expansion team. You're just part of the league. So
Yeah.
when she's now in her age 30 season, we'll see what she can do. And if she can find more success now that she knows what the league is. Do you want to stay at Bay for a bit?
No, because these are not own goals. Neither of us were like, we had things to say about Dana Castellanos that were not necessarily like so excited. We were excited, not so excited. I think we should move on and talk the Crystal Dunn own goal before we get to own goals that other teams made.
Yeah, this was a season to forget for Crystal Dunn.
It was a shocking season against what she had very consistently put up in the league.
And I think like we have to take the own goal because this was the result. Like she had a bad year, she didn't play a lot, not always because of injury reasons. But was there a lot to tell us that was a possibility when she signed with Gotham? I don't know if there was.
No, I think you have to look at off the field stuff. It's reading between the lines on stuff that really doesn't have anything to do with on the field product.
Mm-hmm.
And that like the relationship between off the field issues and on the field performance is not always tethered. And it was the on the field performance stuff with Crystal Dunn that was shocking. I think she found herself in a system that we probably could have been slightly more skeptical about her role in and did not take to it. She was sort of oil and water with Juan Carlos Amoros's style.
Yeah,
And
I think also you just have to recognize like the worst season she had in her NWSL career since 2016 by NetG Plus per 96. She posted a .13 NetG Plus above positional average per 96, and that was in 2016. And that is still excellent. Like, she's always been excellent. And when you talk about, like, how does she fit in the system, like, the Crystal Dunn positional question is always a champagne problem. At least it's always been a champagne problem, no matter what the team, no matter what the head coach, no matter whether she's playing for the U.S. or she's playing at club level. That's always a problem that you'll want to have when you have a player that good who can do that many different things that we didn't consider. And given her level of work rate, given her level of graft, it actually made a lot of sense that she would work with Juan Carlos Amoros.
Mm-hmm.
But she really didn't. At all.
Yeah.
Like she posted a negative .05 NetG Plus above positional average per 96. That
shocking for her.
I mean, it's just scandalous. Like that is a 20-point drop from her average. An average which made her one of the like 10 or 15 best players in the league history, you know, over the course of several seasons. Like it just doesn't make any sense. If there was maybe an injury that she just didn't want reported and was trying to play through, that might make some sense. If there's more, I mean, the excused absence at the end of the season is still unexplained. We don't know what that was about, so we shouldn't speculate on it. But something was not right. We just don't know what it was. And I don't know if we can really pinpoint a single cause to it, but we obviously have to take the own goal, but like everybody has to take the own goal. Well, Yael Averbuch has to take the own goal. Juan Carlos Amoros has to take the own goal. Crystal Dunn has to take the own goal on that. You know, like there's just no reason for us to think that she would have had the season she had in 2024.
There are two more playoff teams that we have yet to discuss. One, Chicago, we owe no own goals. That team was rancid, and we picked them to be rancid, and they just overperformed like crazy.
Overperformed and played like flat track bullies in those overperformances. So yeah.
Yeah, I when re-listening, I thought we nailed Chicago. I thought we were on point. They just happened to squeak in and then get demolished by Orlando in round one of the playoffs. The one that we missed on, and this was a bigger just whiff, was Kansas City. And Kansas City we've talked about it before. It's funny that the first mention of Temwa Chawinga on this podcast, Evan gets wrong. He knows how to pronounce her name, but it was just a statement of how much we didn't know about her.
Yeah.
And like what she was possible, like what was possible from her.
Mm-hmm.
But in re-listening to our previews, we also underestimated the reimagining of Vanessa DiBernardo.
I think that is, like Chawinga, again, if you knew that Chawinga was going to have the season that she was going to have, I hope a team is talking to you about benefits and salary structure. If you nailed Claire Hutton, then you're a scout or you're paid really close attention to her at youth national team level, and I tip my cap. We were not observant of those things. So we didn't know what Claire Hutton was going to be. It is really Debinha and DiBernardo having the seasons that they had. Like Debinha, at least you have a track record, but she's getting older. So like, how is that going to continue? Especially after she gets injured on opening day. It's Bia and it's Chawinga. We just didn't know. And Bia, maybe you say like, well, she's showing up for Brazil, so maybe you give her a little bit more confidence. But Chawinga, it's just like, I don't know, man. I wish we had more video to watch to have had a more informed opinion about it. Because when you have that big of a question mark around a player who's probably going to be a central part of your attack, or at least be coming off the bench regularly, and we didn't know how she was going to fit in those roles, it was really hard to say if Kansas City was going to be as good as they were. But it's really DiBernardo that we probably should have been more observant of, because it's not like she's never had in possession qualities before. Like she's one of the more all-rounded deep lying playmakers the league has ever seen. But we just didn't think that you could make her like an out and out number 10 or a box crashing 8 in the way that Andonovski made her.
Yeah, and I think the next thing to sort of mention is just sleeping on Vlatko.
Yeah.
Vlatko, who had been a very good club coach, who had a rocky spell, some of it unfortunate with the U.S. women's national team. I think it was hard to imagine him getting his groove back the way he got his groove back.
If I remember,
frankly,
though, like when that hiring was announced, I'm pretty sure we said, like, we think this is going to go better than the U.S. run was going to go, because some coaches are just better in a club environment, and it seems like he's probably one of those guys. But even saying that still underestimates that on paper they were probably the best team in the league last year.
Yeah, I think the thing that Vlatko did, and this was the benefit of just having more time,
yeah,
and being able to recruit in the way he recruited, is he had a very specific vision for how this team could play. And from day one, from that opening slugfest with Portland, it was abundantly clear how this team was going to press and then use rest defense and then sort of exploit all of the best. He really got the most out of the talent on hand that one could really ask for out of that roster.
Yeah, and it's no accident that he also is not just the head coach of the team, he's the sporting director of the team, which means he oversees all aspects of the development of soccer with the squad, which means like, I've got a style of play, I've got a tactical vision, this is what it's going to be, and then it's the GM's job to go find the players that fit that vision.
Totally. And I think that in this instance, in this season, he did a remarkable job.
Yeah, I agree.
Of assembling the talent he needed to play to play to the vision he had for the team.
Yeah. We underestimated that without question.
For sure. Before we get to our placement points announcement, I'll say that I just, Evan, who had been so high on Louisville in 2023 and put 5 of Louisville's players in his best 11 when we drafted them, I said, I just like the pieces in our preview of Louisville, and I still like the pieces. They just didn't come together.
Bad year.
And yeah, and that's fine. But Louisville, I had picked to make the playoffs. They did not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
We had put together a sort of preseason standings, and they were slightly different. They were actually really remarkably, we were pretty in alignment about this stuff. But it turned out when we did our little end of year standings that we ended up tied on how off we were.
Yeah, and by what we mean is we basically assigned each other 1 point for every placement in the table we were off for a team. So like if a team finished 4th, but we predicted them to finish 8th, that's 4 placement points. Mm-hmm. So then you add, and also if we predicted somebody to finish 7th, but they finished 2nd, that's 5 placement points as well. So the direction doesn't matter. It's just the gap between prediction and final spot. So obviously the fewer placement points you have, the better you did.
Mm-hmm.
So how many placement points did you have at the end of the day?
56, as did you.
Yep. We tied exactly right or we are exactly tied on the number of placement points. We just did it in slightly different ways.
What was your biggest miss?
My biggest miss was Orlando, who I picked to finish 10th, and they obviously finished first.
My biggest miss is a combination of Kansas City and Orlando. I had finished them to pick 12th and 9th, respectively, and they finished
4th and 1st.
4th and 1st.
Mm-hmm. My best prediction was I picked Louisville to finish 9th, and they indeed finished 9th.
That was very good. My best prediction was North Carolina 6, which you also got.
They ended up finishing 5th.
Yeah, that's right. And our Gotham pick was not bad either.
Yeah, we both picked them to win the Shield, and they ended up in 3rd, so not too far off.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to own goals that were made outside of this podcast. Oh, other quick hits for our own goals. It is impossible to believe that Seattle doesn't figure out a way to make the playoffs. Theo Lloyd Hughes absolutely revealed the psychological condition of Fran Alonso in our preseason conversation with him, and we should have been aware of that. Anytime the guy is described as playing music at all hours of the night and taught himself graphic design while also being a football manager speaks to an unsustainable lifestyle that we maybe should have been cognizant of. Then credit to Kieran for correctly picking Utah 12th.
Well, they technically finished 11th because of the points deduction for Angel City shifted those 2 spots, but yeah.
And credit to Ariana for picking North Carolina to finish 5th, exactly where they finished.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk. There were some rookies that we mentioned that we probably shouldn't have mentioned so much. We spent a lot of time on Ali Lemos, who was a non-factor for Orlando.
Sam Meza at Seattle.
Yeah, who's no longer with Seattle, who's on loan at Dallas Trinity. And the last quick hit, and we'll say it very mildly and quietly, Olivia Moultrie, we didn't see having a regressed season, and she maybe mildly regressed in Portland.
Very odd, but also that may have a lot to do with just everything else that's going on in Portland.
Yeah, exactly. Like when we missed on Portland, I think, we had described there being a fair amount of variance, and it turned out they sort of played to the basement of their potential, and that included Olivia Moultrie just sort of not playing at her best. All right, let's go to own goals made in the league.
Yes.
I think the worst signing own goal, Dana Castellanos.
Yeah.
Not a question.
I will own. I think I was maybe a little bit higher on her than I should have been when we previewed Bay FC when that signing got made. And I should have, and I think we've talked about this on the show before, like we should have maybe given Gareth Taylor more credence for giving her so few minutes with Manchester City than we did, because she was an absolute mess with Bay FC. And it's not a cheap contract. And that's the thing that's a real problem.
Yeah, if she wasn't, that's exactly the problem. It's not that Dana Castellanos isn't couldn't be a productive player somewhere. It's that she wasn't a productive player at all for Bay, and that she's an albatross of a contract.
Yeah. And the moment she got benched, they got better.
Yeah. And that's, frankly, it's the worst possible thing to happen to you as a player, to realize I'm the problem, it's me.
And and it's the worst possible situation for a front office, because you are now saddled with a contract that doesn't seem movable, that is eating up a ton of salary cap space. And if you want to finish higher than 7th next year, you got to go get some more pieces. But where do you find the money to do that?
Yeah, you got to do a hell of a sales job convincing someone that she could have an Ashley Sanchez style resurgence in a place like North Carolina.
Yeah.
Where if you let her cook, let her be the conductor of your team's orchestra, there's a productive future there.
Yeah.
And as I say that out loud, I can imagine someone seeing that. It's just they'd also have to be kind of data blind, because there's enough data on Castellanos at this point to say flawed player.
Jessie Fleming is an interesting case. At the time she was transferred, she was the biggest transfer fee into the NWSL that had been seen up to that point. Obviously came with both Canadian and Chelsea pedigree. And if you look at the primary things that a central midfielder is supposed to be good at or contribute to the team, namely being a good defender and being a good passer. Like, she was net positive on the season. What is very difficult to do as a central midfielder is to generate extreme negative dribbling value. And she did that. She posted a negative 0.04 dribbling G plus above positional average score, which among central mids with at least 500 minutes was the second worst of the season. And you ratchet that minutes threshold up to 1,000, it was just the worst. And the reason it's so hard to generate such negative dribbling value is because the place at which you play means that there are multiple potential outcomes for a dribbling action because you are so far away from both goals that it's very hard to lose much value if you lose the ball, and it's very hard to gain value if you are moving further upfield with the ball. But she somehow managed to do it and did not have a great deal of ball control, which is part of the reason that Portland could look so vulnerable to counterattacks, especially early in the season.
Yeah, I think the sort of translating to the eye test on this one is, I think that Jessie Fleming was unaccustomed to the amount of pressure that was on her the minute the ball got to her. And then the minute teams started keying on that, saw yet greater. She became a choke point for opposing teams to scout. And I think she plays some hero ball occasionally with Canada. I think this league hit her like a ton of bricks, and that was true for a lot of Europeans who made the transition over. The own goal on Portland's front office, just doing this. Nicole Payne had a really rough season as well. Isabelle Obeys, we've talked about this. There was a really non-critical translation of like what the player had done and then adjusting them to the system that they were coming into that happened in Portland over and over again.
I think the difference between Fleming and Payne, though, is that Fleming is going to be 27 next year, and she has a lot more seasoning playing against the best in the world. And therefore, I have more confidence that she can maybe figure out how better to keep the ball next year, especially if, Portland gets reimagined a little bit once they actually hire a GM and she can get different talent around her. Like, I have more confidence that Fleming can figure this out and that this is more of a bump in the road than, say, maybe somebody like Payne, who just really looked lost.
One that was a lost for everyone, including the player, CeCe Kaiser.
Yeah.
A trade we did not like to Houston to begin with from Kansas City.
And it seemed to be made against her will. At least that's how she made it sound.
Mm-hmm. But she had a complete lost season in Houston.
A lot of it injury driven, to be fair. But she wasn't much of a producer when she was healthy in her very limited minutes. And then got flipped to Gotham and was sort of like the last player on the bench sub for them. Because why do they need CeCe Kaiser? They were loaded with attackers. But it's just none of these transactions were cheap for any team trying to acquire her. So it didn't make Houston better. It didn't put their financial situation in better shape. It didn't make Gotham better. It's a lot of money for Gotham to be carrying now. And, did it make Kansas City better? I don't know if it did that either. I mean, it sort of depends on what you think of Nichelle Prince and how they would have tried to construct a forward line with Cooper, Chewinga, Bia, and Kaiser. How do you find 3 spots for 4 players when that's your combination? So maybe it was an advantage for Kansas City, but Kansas City certainly didn't handle it well.
Yeah, that's right. I think the next one where kind of hard to say anybody won this trade, Maria Sanchez was sort of an own goal, both for Houston in giving her a very large contract. Then Houston moved it on to San Diego, where Maria Sanchez is, as we talked about earlier, her very special skill is she's an excellent passer of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that has limited mileage when you're talking about somebody who's being asked to score goals.
Yeah, I just, I think we've mentioned this. We mentioned this on the show at one point, is like, much in the way that like left-handers and left-footers in other sports and in other areas get higher value simply because they create different problems for defenses or pitchers to solve that they don't see as often as they do with righties, that it helps Maria Sanchez's passing skills play up because she's a true left-footed left winger, and that they care more about that than they do about her inability to create her own shot. Is that correct of front offices to think that way? You know, I don't know. Certainly for the amount of money that Houston signed her for and now that San Diego is carrying with her contract, maybe not. But she's just a very weird player because very few wingers who are as good at passing as she is are as bad at shooting as she is, or shooting from good chances as she is. And that's just very unusual. So ultimately she was a net negative because she was so bad at trying to shoot from good positions. But yeah, she's a weird one.
Yeah. Next up, we had what Houston did with that money.
At least in part, yeah, which is go out and sign Ramona Bachman,
who was Evan quite bad.
Yeah, she was. She was tied for 91st out of 99 attackers with at least 500 minutes by net G plus above positional average per 96. It's brutal. She wasn't a good receiver. She was not a good passer. She was not a good shooter. She was a barely above water dribbler, and certainly not enough to even out the deficiencies elsewhere. And she's, 32, 33?
It was a stunningly bad move.
Yeah. I don't really know what Houston was thinking, but also Houston doesn't seem to do a lot of thinking. So she was 33. She was 33 years old when they signed her.
This was one of those moves that... Is it Alex Singer? It's Alex Singer who was the GM.
Alex Singer was the GM at the time, but how much of this was Alex Singer's choice is another question.
Yeah, this was the Ramona Bachman signing is happening like in the Fuhrer bunker days of Fran Alonso and Alex Singer's time in Houston.
Yeah, Maria Sanchez has already demanded a trade, which they then awarded.
Yeah, exactly. And like they went and spent the money on Paige Nielsen, who was cheap and good, or cheap and fine, might be a better description. A trade that I think we thought looked pretty good for Houston. It was a real head scratcher for Angel City. And then they signed Ramona Bachman, and they got a player who was actively worse than Maria Sanchez for a huge chunk of change.
Yep, exactly.
So no winners here necessarily.
Nope.
Anything else you want to cover?
Do we want to touch? I mean, we put down Bethany Balcer ? If we consider her a bad move, and for whom?
Yeah, I think Bethany Balcer was a fine move for Louisville.
Yeah,
I think Seattle just had a year of like, what are you doing, bud? And some of that has to do with just the incredibly prolonged ownership takeover.
Mm-hmm.
But Bethany Balcer being moved along was not the Seattle attacker I think I would have moved along.
I agree.
And she got to a Louisville team where she tried to help make an impact, get that team into the playoffs, but left a hole in Seattle where like the goal scoring, where does that goal scoring come from? And we talked about it in our preview with Susie Rance, and it was, I think you had made mention of either this was your take or someone you'd heard's take was like, well, Bethany Balcer doesn't play enough defense. Well, Jordan Huitema doesn't score goals.
Yeah.
And we saw Bethany Balcer, A, kind of does play defense, and B, Jordan Huitema continued to not score goals.
That's right.
So for Seattle, it was just like a head-scratching move in a year of really head-scratching moves. I think we should talk about, there were a lot of first-round draft busts last year, but there always are.
Given the season's I mean, if you're a fan of Ali Sentnor, having 3 of the top 5 overall picks all be Rookie of the Year candidates is actually a really good hit rate for the draft.
Yeah.
You know, we need to see more from Hal Hirschfeld in possession, but she's now in the U.S. setup, which is a good sign. We need to see less long range shooting and better decision making from Sentnor, which could happen, especially if she has a full season with better pieces around her. And Croy Bethune has arguably had the best rookie season in NWSL history. Like, for all of that to happen in the top 5 first round picks is like kind of unusual.
Yeah, and Savvy King and Brecken Mozingo were both like huge whiffs.
Yeah, and maybe that's what
in
balances it out, because the number 2 pick is hardly ever that bad of a bust.
Yeah, and the Mozingo pick, I think everybody thought was overrated at the time, and very much felt like Utah really reaching for a player that was effectively homegrown.
But I think beyond the top 5 picks, like, it's still, you don't get a really great hit rate historically from picks 6 to 12 or 6 to 14. So the fact that, like, say, Meza was second round, wasn't she? Or was she first?
She was second round.
Yeah. But people like Ali Lemos not hitting, or Macy Bell kind of getting traded mid-season as a first-round draft pick. Like, this is not...
Raylan Turner getting traded for mid-season.
Right. Who is that? That's actually pretty good, you know, at least by her peripherals. Like,
shouldn't be dribbling, but yes.
Yeah. This is just not... I did not feel like that was, like, super out of the ordinary for the way that the drafts often go. But we'll get no more data points on that going forward.
Fair enough. And to close us out, we both picked Spain in the Olympics.
We did.
And
again, not the most unreasonable thing to do.
No, I would say it was the safest pick of everything that we made here.
Yeah.
And it went busto.
It went busto, and like they did not play super unluckily throughout the tournament. Like, they did not deserve a gold medal and didn't get it or anything. So
no, and the truest own goal here is both on us, but also on Spain for being terrible losers. Just like,
yeah, they do not like to lose. Yeah,
disgracefully rude and graceless in their losing.
Yeah, which is something that those players, specifically the ones who play for Barcelona, they can sometimes do as well at the club level.
Yeah,
they don't like it when teams play ugly against them.
But yes,
it's not gentlemanly. It's not ladylike.
As it's bad people behavior.
Mm-hmm.
As we move forward, I think we will make many own goals in the coming year, and I hope that we can handle them with some grace. But we will always be accountable to the mistakes that we have made on this podcast. If there is something that you feel we have missed, please let us know, and we will mention it in future episodes. But until then, Evan, you want to take us out?
Yeah. Thanks for making it such a great year, guys. We feel like I've done this gratitude speech many times over the last couple of months, but we mean it every time. Like, you guys make the show run. You guys make us better at what we do. And every single dollar you are willing to spend on a Patreon subscription, trust me, it makes a difference, both in our own lives and also in what we are able to do with the show. So
Absolutely.
We really, really do appreciate it. And if you're not already a Patreon subscriber, consider becoming one. You have until January 1st to get a 30% discount on an annual membership. So if you're listening to this on the 31st or the 1st, cash that in, baby. Otherwise, $6 a month will get you 4 bonus episodes every single month, access to our Discord, access to our in-game live streams that we do on YouTube. And yeah.
We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up in the new year.
Yeah, 2025 is going to be an even better year than 2024. We know that. So yeah, keep listening. Keep listening for. We're going to do a live episode. We're going to get back to doing live streams when the season starts. We're going to do season preview week again whenever the schedule is announced, which is going to be a lot of fun. More guests are coming. It's going to be great. So thank you for sticking with us. We hope that you will stick with us again into 2025. We are off next week. We are not doing an episode on main feed next week. We will be on Patreon next week, however.
We're taking a little January break.
Taking a mini break. We extended our content probably past the point where we thought we would for 2024, but that's okay. But we do need a slight January rest. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, we will talk to you there very soon. And otherwise, we will speak to you on main feed around the time that the European seasons start firing up again. So we will speak to you guys then.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.